Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and a bit of a transitional week, plus Morgan Wallen. And it's Billboard BREAKDOwn.
I don't remember.
So like I said, kind of an odd week. Feels like we got a stopgap for whatever we get from Ariana Grande next week, although it sadly seems like the conversation about her music is the last thing on anyone's mind. But it also feels like there was a chance for more interesting discourse for the charts that kind of flamed out in multiple places, leaving the Hot 100 just a little bit more tedious, but also paradoxically surprising. Welcome to my world in 2026. But let's not waste any time. Let's talk about our top 10, and at the very top, our consistent number one, Choosing Texas by Ella Langley. By all intents and purposes, it was set to lose this top spot, which it actually did in sales and streaming, but that pop radio crossover just kept it afloat, a margin that you can't really crack in 1 week. And there's a certain irony that our big new number two, Been By Now by Morgan Wallen, certainly got there on streaming and sales, had one hell of a Nashville push too, but just not enough to compete when you don't ship him to any other formats. And sure, you could argue that by Nashville standards they've moved pretty quickly, but Music Row also knows if they push Morgan Wallen to pop radio, he's got a real chance of picking up spins. I Had Some Help with Post Malone became a 2020s crossover smash on that basis. And it's ironic because the other bit of proof comes with I Knew It, I Knew You by Taylor Swift just slipping down to number 3, with weakening streaming, but still this high thanks to crossover radio in pop and country. She's at least gonna play the game, and my systemic issue with Music Row is this weird refusal to take risks, capitalize on your momentum, allow the stars to play ball on the bigger field, especially in a down year for pop. Make the most of your opportunities. Case in point, I Can't Love You Anymore has both Morgan Wallen and Ella Langley on it. It's got great streaming. Why not ship it to pop radio? Maybe you would have a shot that your big names can take it beyond number 4. The other side of this argument's Boston by Stella Leftley, currently down to number 5, but speeding up the radio with rock solid streaming, and that she doesn't have that established Music Row connection, so naturally she's been promoted cross-format. She will reap the benefits. I still think she's got a shot to contend for the very top if she comes in and the timing is right. Incidentally, this might be the first time since maybe the 1970s that the whole top 5 is country or country adjacent. If that genre is not part of your analysis as a mainstream music fan, well, it should have been years ago. I've been warning y'all about it. It looks like y'all got some homework to do. Get on it. Well, anyway, the biggest pop song right beneath that, and somehow still sticking around, is Dracula by Tame Impala and Jenny at number 6. Chalk this up to radio yet again, although it might be nearing a peak, which I might as well say for So Easy to Fall in Love by Olivia Dean at number 7, which absolutely did peak and does not have the streaming to get more support. It's probably going to get eclipsed by Hate That I Made You Love Me by Ariana Grande, which is down to number 8 right now, but with the radio push in full swing and the streaming likely to revive if she gets an album bomb, it's probably could make a play for much higher, maybe even the top spot yet again. It also pushed back Be Her by Ella Langley at number 9, basically only here because of streaming. Nashville radio dropped their best pop crossover opportunity like a stone here, and that leaves Man I Need by Olivia Dean at number 10. What can I say? Radio might be done with it, but streaming is still holding on, at least for now, and that's enough. That takes us to our losers and dropouts. The only one of the latter that's worth caring about, alongside a bunch of Gracie Abrams losses, is Die on This Hill by Sienna Spiro, a genuinely terrible song that is still going to make the year-end list for 2026. I'll be talking about it again in about 5 months' time on the main channel. Stay tuned for that. But we also don't have that many losers here. Again, Hit the Wall by Gracie Abrams crashed right back to earth down to 41, and we all saw the sudden return of Normal from BTS last week collapse off the sales to 89, but there are 2 other interesting stories. The first and the greater relief comes with Misery by Pupsy sliding down to 60 after big gains last week. I gotta hope that this brief moment of virality with this fading early is for everyone's sake. But then there's My Body Isn't Ready by Somber falling down to 72. The song is really damn good. I like this kid, but I gotta wonder if the horrible song title is actually holding it back alongside other hits of his being in circulation. Homewrecker has not gone anywhere, so maybe that's the problem. They don't want one song to cannibalize the other. Now, with our returns and gains, very little worth caring about in the former group was Sunburn by Tecker Wetmore at 99, and I'm Spent by Drake featuring Low Shimmy crawling back to 93. But the gains are kind of interesting because all of them show some degree of continued traction. I just wish they were a lot better. If the best of them is Empty Words by Corey Kent off the return to 85, that's not promising. And while we're sticking in country, Bottom of Your Boots by Ella Langley also came off the return to 77, and Carry On by Kenny Chesney is seeing more summer spins at 69. And I just don't know what to do with the last two here. House Tour by Sabrina Carpenter seems to be given yet more life at 61, but what concerns me is Bloodstream by Alyssa Grace at 45. It's not a good song either. I got the impression that a lot of the stripped back pop, country, folk, singer-songwriters coming off TikTok are taking advantage of no real competition to capitalize on this year. Again, not exactly a good thing, but thankfully we got a healthy list of new arrivals, and they're all over the damn place for once, so let's start off with number 100, Hands Up by Jelly Roll.
Everybody put your hands up. If you ain't perfect but you try, put a way up to the sky, touching heaven kinda high. Ain't that where we wanna go when we die?
You can argue when folks started really getting sick of Jelly Roll. I'd point to 2024, but 2026 has felt like the gloves finally came off, and where his run started to seem more mercenary and ugly than all the proselytizing. For me, my general opinion is that he's been wildly hit and miss for the past 4 years. That opinion's held up. He's featured prominently on both my best and worst list of hit songs, but part of his issue for me was always oversaturation, just too much of him, and having a lot less of him to deal with has generally been better. No, that was not a pun on his weight loss and personal life. Sit down. And thus with this, okay, I'll admit I'm conflicted because there are elements that really work here. It's a little cleaner and a little less bluesy in the percussion and production, but I like that warm southern acoustic rollick and the major key swell. I'll also say that on a pure compositional standard, the lyrical construction is actually really good, and given that Hardy co-wrote this, I'm rarely one to give him praise. The flow of the rhymes of the verses are really tight, the details are vivid to set the scene, and the lyrical sentiment of places where you put your hands up, at a concert where he was in the crowd in 1999, getting arrested for drugs decades later, and then at church, I think it's well executed, even if the second verse feels like it's really pushing the tone of the song to its limit. Where this track will make or break for you is if you're sick of the broadly sketched Jesus Saves Redemption arc that Jelly Roll has been pushing for years now, and if that works in contrast with everything around his personal life the past couple of years, whether there is genuine pathos and more of a Luke Combs vein, because man, Luke Combs could have easily done this a lot better, or just a lot of brand management, if we're going to be more cynical. Look, the craft is here. I think it's the best thing Jelly Roll has contributed to since Bloodline, but the recommendation is tentative at best. Number 98, Sue Me by Audrey Hobert.
Sue me, I wanna be, sue me, I wanna be, sue me, I wanna be wanted. Sue me, I wanna be wanted. Sue me, I wanna be wanted. Sue me, I wanna be, sue me, I wanna be, sue me, I wanna be wanted.
So this is very funny for me. I mentioned Audrey Hobert last week in connection with her co-writes for Gracie Abrams and the fact that she is Malcolm Todd's sister. I'm going to keep bringing that up because it's very clear what side of the family got all the talent. And as Abrams' song sank like a stone, Hobert got her first solo debut, as it appears that many others discovered her in the track listing and the liner notes at the same time. This is a cut from last year, her debut single that eventually wound up on her debut album, a song that I preemptively checked out last week when I did my own quick investigation into her, and this is where I tell you that I'm pretty lukewarm on this as well. What it reminds me of immediately in the blocky synths that clip the edges of the mix, the programmed drums, and the pileup of half goofy, half ironic sound effects alongside the quirky writing, it was all over mid-2000s indie pop, a scene that for me was always very hit and miss. Sometimes you get lightning in a bottle where every bit of quirk builds up to something a little bit more potent with an instant earworm or more challenging compositions or genuine pathos. Think an Imogen Heap or even a Sarah Bareilles. But sometimes you get something so cloying and twee that it becomes the last thing you ever want to hear, especially if it's a radio standard. And Hobert is really treading that line. Made all the trickier when you realize this is about hooking up with your ex in a bad idea right sort of lane. But that's also not exactly a favorable comparison because while both acts are obviously influenced by Taylor Swift, Olivia Rodrigo has pipes and theatrical attitude. Hobert is relying way more on familiar patter that feels like it's trying a little too hard to impress somebody. More importantly, Rodrigo sold that song with some actual stakes to color her ironic eye rolls, whereas Hobert's pitfall feels like it's wrapped up in the line that she is convinced is brilliant: fucking your ex is iconic. Well, to who? It gives the game away that all this is to set up a very performative element for the audience than, I don't know, the ex in question or herself, given that all this feels like it's being done at her own expense. That of course it's a bad idea, but secretly it's a good idea because she'll set up a threesome with Gracie Abrams along the way, and it feels like a dated scene out of a sitcom. Yeah, the blocky pop of the drums and the buzzy bounce of the synths and the fake horns, it's kind of cute, and it gives it more instrumental personality than, well, anything Gracie Abrams has ever done, but the self-deprecation hits a note that's not quite as charming as it seems to think it is. Not saying it's bad, the floor is decently high. I'm not about to seek out more. All I'm saying. Number 91, Matadora by Karol G.
Me dice que me ponga fácil. Yo no soy una puta, casi. Y se puso asqueroso, nasty. Yo tengo el culo gordo, fatty. Me dice que me ponga fácil. Yo no soy una puta.
Alright, hopefully this will be a little bit more straightforward to explore than after the last two. Karol G teaming up with Tiny and Cashmere Cat for reggaeton, something we honestly haven't heard that much of on the Hot 100 for some time. And then you hear the track and you kind of grasp why. Don't get me wrong, absolutely nothing wrong with Karol G making a very horny track about getting fucked where romance is just completely off the table. She's got that husky, raw energy in her delivery to sell that, and maybe that's why the percussion feels so stock amidst its multiple beat switches. Probably my favorite drum pattern comes on the only post-chorus. It's good, it's familiar, but there are two problems. The first maybe being the horn melody. It's more stately than sleazy, almost mournful, and it doesn't really match some of the subject matter in the slightest in terms of energy or tone. And the second problem is the length of the song. Come on. It's barely 2.5 minutes. It's probably going to get remixed a dozen times over by DJs who want that slow burn groove to play out, but it leaves the actual composition feeling very bare bones, missing a little bit more meat. Again, I'm talking about the song, which is fine, but again, wanna like this more than I do. Number 87, I See Why by Moneybagg Yo.
They don't pass that. They stuck in the city, let them have it. I just spent 20,000 on some khakis, but these some grown hard straight from Matic. What's on your wrist? Let me see what you're having. 5990 rose gold paddock.
Okay, I don't know who is actually seeking out Moneybagg Yo, an artist I don't think I've ever consistently liked and occasionally have really disliked, but mainstream rap is having a bad year. Why not him, I guess? And truthfully, this is the sort of comeback that you would hope for. The stutter of the bassy trap groove is solidly balanced against the ominous bells. Moneybagg Yo has personality and a pretty good hook. Even if his ad-libs can still feel like they are just running over his actual bars, they sound a little tighter than usual. And for someone to deliver some actual swagger this summer, it's pretty welcome. Even if the brag of spending over 20 grand on a pair of khakis sounds like something that the uncoolest grind set millionaire would brag about on Twitter. But that's also kind of the problem. Once you're past all of that, Moneybagg Yo is just not saying very much. Just bragging about being a sex symbol, citation needed, brand names, inconsequential people who are talking shit online, and some playful jabs that he gets why people are so jealous of him when his life is so great. I mean, I wish all of this was alongside some actual bars or more cleverness or even some menace beyond trying to toy with the feds who are apparently searching for lyrics to target and indict him. I mean, it's more polished than a lot of Moneybagg Yo songs. I wouldn't be surprised if this ran up some numbers, but I don't know. It's the low ceiling that's going to keep me from coming back that much. It's just okay. I'll leave it there. Number 75, Camera by Charli XCX.
All the people, not a single kiss goodbye. Your French exit, chase the stars. Yeah, the ones in your eyes, but let's be honest, I'm talking about the ones on the pavement.
So, I wasn't really expecting an album bomb from Charli XCX. I knew there'd be some impact, but I expected, given the swerve of music, fashion, film, that it would be limited. And thus it's nice to see one of the better songs from the album actually get some motion. And let's start off with the concept. For an album that is all about feeling constrained and frustrated by that public spotlight and celebrity, the seeming contradictions at the core of this song are pretty fascinating, as she feels a strange freedom with the camera on and focused on her. Yeah, on the surface, it's a little absurd to want to be an actress at 34 without any training and that she might just suck, and she's still working within the context of a script and a director, but in comparison with celebrity and fame that only wants to celebrate a very limited picture of who she is as an artist, this apparently allows her artistic freedom and range, specifically a messy and very human imperfection that the mainstream would not understand or accommodate. And yeah, a lot of folks absolutely deserve that implied insult. I've heard the album. Now, around that subject, the writing can be a little thin there, and like the majority of the album, I'm not exactly impressed by the execution. The fluttery but canned-sounding guitar production, a mix full of dead air, the painfully weak drums, that hollowed-out, buzzy, mid-2000s synth gloss that reminds me a little more than it should of LCD Sound System, the very short runtime. But as a solid pop rock experiment, I'll call this good. It's not great, but the camera might be worth turning on for this. I'll give her that. Number 24, Animal by KATSEYE.
Inside behind the closed doors, they get a glimpse here on the dance floor. You move like an animal. Nobody knows you're out of control, but I see a side behind the closed doors. They get a glimpse here on the dance floor. You move like an animal.
When the buzz around this song is, well, it's not as bad as KATSEYE normally are, you know that's not always a compliment, right? Especially when the primary songwriter of this is Ed Sheeran, and I can't think of someone's energy who's more incongruous to fit with KATSEYE's online catastrophe by way of K-pop sound. But after listening to this, okay, I get why Ed Sheeran gave it to them, especially as reminded in the melody that at one point he wrote Shape of You for Rihanna before cutting it himself, and that this might be a little too slinky and horny for him to pull off well at his age. But I don't know, he didn't have to give this to KATSEYE when he could have very easily made it a solo hit in the vein of Shivers, especially on the radio, and especially as his cadence and word choice is very obvious compared to what they normally do. I don't know, maybe at his age and stage of life, folks are more receptive to this coming from a K-pop girl group than Ed Sheeran. I remember the backlash. That's probable, but credit to the girls for actually making the most of it. I'm not going to judge them for this. They talked that it's a more conventional pop song that could play to the mainstream, and they are right on the mark with that, but their catalog has a serious lack of that baseline quality, where this screams obvious hit that they could play in 5 years and not be embarrassed about like the rest of their careers. I like the hums here. I like the crisp drums with traces of a throwback Motown groove with some of those electric embellishments. I really like the choppy acoustic guitars on that hook. The bridge has some windswept punch to it. And, well, I could imagine, well, anyone from Ed Sheeran to One Republic to Maroon 5 making this an easy fit in their catalog. Hell, it's better than the Maroon 5 song about animals. Giving it to KATSEYE to at least allow the implication of queerness in the lyrics, That's probably a smart choice. Maybe also a little bit dated in the tone and production. You could have put this out just under a decade ago. It would have been a hit then too. But a good song can cover up a lot. I'll stick up for this. Good for KATSEYE, I guess. And finally, number 2, Been By Now by Morgan Wallen.
Keep trying to work things out. Yeah, baby, we're a breeze when the lights go down. It wouldn't be so hard when we ain't in the dark. Yeah.
Maybe it's just me, but I think Morgan Wallen might have had something to prove with this new single. Ella Langley has thoroughly eclipsed him in terms of top charting success with demonstrably better music that was more country as hell to boot, where he even sounded better on her production in their duet. That subtly changes the expectations for me for a big new single, especially after the miserable I'm the Problem that is apparently still charting hits. Or he could go back to the runny slurry of his usual standbys in a stable of producers, where the melody is tepid goop behind the drums that have got the most presence in the mix. Might as well credit Joey Moy for that and giving the song at least some momentum, outside of his questionably mastered nasal drawl. It seems like he took all the wrong lessons of pulling from 1980s country textures. How on earth do his vocals still sound this rough? And the content is not doing it for me either. There is promise in the melancholy of a relationship that's just exhausted all of its options and just waiting for the moment to pull the trigger, or just hope they maybe could ride out the dead bed for something better, where Morgan Wallen wishes he could go back to when it all went wrong and rekindle things, but he's accepted that it's over. But it's that line on the hook about things still working when the lights are off that feels really cheap to me. Of course the sex is still good. Citation needed. Glad you still have that page from Adam Levine's playbook. It adds even less pathos here, and it's not even that it's bad, but trudging and mediocre. A song that's fine on the first listen and really obnoxious by the third, which gives me zero faith in that upcoming album apparently next year. Joy. And yeah, screw it, it's the worst this week. At this point, Morgan Wallen puts out so much music with such limited quality control, he doesn't get the benefit of the doubt anymore, especially when it's glop like this. The best, kind of tricky here, but I'm actually going to go with a tie between Camera by Charli XCX and Animal by KATSEYE. Maybe a shocker, but the former song's got a great concept hampered by some dubious production. The other is just craftsmanship that lives up to some low expectations. That's the charts in 2026, y'all. Anyway, next week is likely going to be a lot of Ariana Grande. I don't think we're going to be lucky enough to hear some of the new Shabuzi, but we can hope. Stay tuned for that. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.